A good weathering job comes with a good start. Here are 4 steps that you can do to prepare your models for weathering, coming up right now on JC's Rip Track. Hi everyone, my name is John and welcome to JC's Rip Track. If this is your first time here and you would like advice and tips on how to transform your plastic models into something that you would find on the railroad today, then please hit subscribe and that little bell icon so you can be updated anytime that I upload a new video. Before we get into it, what are some things that you have done to prepare your models for weathering? Let me know in the comments section down below. If you haven't already done so, check out the first video in this series, which gives an overview of the process for weathering factory painted models. This video covers the second step of 8, and if you stick around to the end, you can connect with all of the other videos. Preparing a model for weathering is an essential first step. Even though it is short, without it, at best, it makes the rest of the process more difficult. And at worst, you can actually impair the future operation of your model. So here are 4 things that you should do, plus a little bonus tip. Step number 1, dismantling your model. Now this isn't as extreme as it sounds, but any weathering process requires at least some degree of dismantling your model. For rolling stock, the most basic step is removing the trucks and the wheel sets. Usually it's a good idea to place these into a container where all the parts can be contained. Also, if you're working on multiple cars, it may also be helpful to label the trucks to remind you which ones go with which car. I usually do this with a white pen. Of course, even if you're replacing them, you still need to do this step. For locomotives, dismantling requires a few extra steps. Normally, all you're looking to do here is to remove the shell from the moving parts, and then take the shell apart to have better access to the model. Also, don't forget the fuel tank, although in the case of the model that I'm showing here, the fuel tank is attached to the main chassis. The wheel sets can be more problematic as they have a lot of fiddly bits, and I tend to leave locomotive trucks intact and still attached to the mechanics, but that does require some careful masking. If you're brave, you can take the trucks off. And while it is not really a weathering thing, if you're going to add weight to your rolling stock, this is a perfect time to do it, and if you're doing a DCC installation of the locomotive, you may as well take care of that when you have the shell off. Step number 2. Clean your model. If the model is particularly dirty, you may want to wash it using warm soapy water. You're best to do this after you've done the dismantling step and before you apply the clear coat. Some swear by cleaning the models every time. I don't always, but I don't dispute that it is a good idea. Now, if you're painting an unpainted resin model, that's a different story. Cleaning is absolutely required in that case. Either way, when you're working on the models, be careful of enclosed models that you want to make sure that you don't get water inside. Step number 3, masking. This step is required if the model that you're working on happens to have clear parts such as windows or the like. Sometimes with locomotives, I simply remove the windows ahead of time so there's no need for masking. But if you're working on passenger cars and you're not able to take it apart, then masking is an essential step. As an example, this caboose that I worked on had several windows that were much easier to mask with some Tamiya hobby masking tape. I usually recommend hobby-based masking tapes, but yellow frog tape also works well. You don't want anything with a stronger adhesive as it could remove the markings you're trying to protect. Sometimes in a weathering process, you may want to cover the markings on a given model to give the effect of them being re-added at a later point. Lastly, any electronic pickups, say on a passenger cars or in this case, the trucks of the caboose, should be masked off so that the weathering doesn't impair the electrical stuff. In the case of the caboose, I removed the wheel sets but left the trucks on because the trucks were electrically attached to the rest of the caboose, and I was just a little reluctant, given that this was a commission, that I didn't want to risk impairing the operation of the model. So instead, I masked off the insides of the trucks to make sure that the electrical pickup would still be there. Step number 4. Clear coating. While most factory applied paint is fairly resilient, it's still a good idea to give a protective clear coat as a first step. If you've done any renumbering work, this is also a good idea as it will protect the decals that you've just put down. Clear coats come in 3 basic flavors: gloss, satin, and matte. And while this is fairly basic, each has their own role when it comes to weathering. Gloss coats, appropriately enough, are smooth and shiny, and they are best used when the next step that you're going to be doing is an oil-based paint or an enamel wash. Matte coats are varying degrees of flat and are best used when the next step involves acrylic paints. And lastly, satin is a mid-step between gloss and matte. Because satin coats straddle the line, they have some very special uses. Most often they are used as a setup for the hairspray technique, which I will detail in later videos, or as a good setup for the fading step. Applying clear coats can be done with an airbrush or a spray can. For airbrushing, I tend to use Future Floor Polish mixed with Tamiya X23 flat base in various ratios. A satin finish is a 10-to-1 mix of Future to flat base. Matte or flat decreases this ratio. When you get to a 3-to-1 Future to flat base mix, it will yield a dead flat finish, and anything less than that will appear to frost your model. Using a spray can is a quick way to apply clear coat, especially if you don't have an airbrush. When it comes to spray cans, I tend to use Games Workshop's Purity Seal, or as it is now known, Uniform Varnish, as a satin varnish to my models. Otherwise, for gloss coats, Tester's Gloss Coat is perfect for that, or Tester's Dull Coat if you're looking for doing a flat coat. I will do a later video on various types of clear coats, as it really is worth a video on its own. Now here's the bonus tip. As you move through the weathering process, it is a good idea to put clear coats between each step in order to protect the previous layer from the work that you're going to be doing next. A good rule to remember is matte before acrylics, gloss before oils. Preparing your models may not be the sexiest thing when it comes to weathering, but it makes the rest of the process go far more smoothly, and it saves you a lot of headaches down the road. Check out the other videos in this series, and if you want to get the most out of your painting and weathering projects, please hit subscribe and that little bell icon so you won't miss any upcoming videos when I get into the details of each step. And so good luck, and may you keep on track.